Very pleased not to be joined here at Blogging the Boys by the one and only, the incredible, the internationally known, the season 14 winner of American Idol. You know her and love her from Yahoo Fantasy, and to be quite honest with you, from too many places that I'm able to count at this point in time. She has a very difficult to pronounce last name, and I've been insecure about doing it for the last week ever since I asked her to stop by. It is Kate Magdzuik. They do it right.
Magdzuik. Yeah, just leave off that G, leave off that D, leave off that Z. Like all the letters in my name, you could pretty much just ignore them and then just Magdzuik.
It's
Like your mama, jukebox, Magdzuik, like
it's
so
very
easy.
some names are difficult to say and enunciate or even just break down phonetically. Yours is in that box. But some of them that are in the box are easy to spell, right? Like they're just weird to say. Yours is complicated both ways. Like I right now I couldn't off the top of my head spell it. I think it's GDZUK, the last 4 or 5 letters. Is
You're
that correct?
surprisingly close. Magdziuk, and trust me,
What?
it took it. That is my married name. It took me a while to took me a lot of practice to you know get it down pat here. So like I understand. I understand the stress that comes with the pronunciation because every time I look my father-in-law in the eye, um,
It's like,
and
why'd you
say
do
like
this? Yeah.
I can't fathom as somebody who has a very very simple maiden name. I don't know what I was getting myself into, but hey, you know what? Every time you say my name, you think an extra second about me.
That's
So
true. I've
living rent free.
when I was like thinking about myself when you were describing your father-in-law, I'm sure an upstanding citizen. It's difficult to write. Like it's got to take you a long time to sign your name. That's a lot of, and
Mhm.
because that's a lot of swoops. Like especially if you're doing like a signature, like you're signing something. That is a very difficult. The cursive K is my opinion is no one knows how to do a cursive K. Maybe you do, lowercase K. But it's one of the dumbest cursive letters that there is.
I think Z is probably the stupidest letter, and
Yeah, it's
then so,
definitely
like,
dumb.
I have the Z, and then I go right into the IU, so I go zoop, and then I, like, have a
Yeah.
double it's honestly something that I practice sometimes, just like if I have a notepad that I take my notes
Yeah.
on and I have my to-do list, and sometimes, like, when I'm spacing out, I will just practice writing because I haven't found the perfect signature yet, like I just haven't figured out the perfect swish
Yeah.
of movements. Like if I were a celebrity, I'm going to be honest, I would need to hire somebody to figure out how to optimize my signature. But luckily, we haven't reached that point. So I instead am here with you to talk about the Steelers and the Cowboys. So
Yeah, well,
that's
if you were a
really fun.
professional athlete, you could do the like KM and then your number. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that's a very simple move. Like if you were like number 10, like KM10, like that's your official signature. Unless like
Ooh.
Fanatics has you doing like a special sit down thing, like at the White Party or whatever it's called, at the Hamptons or wherever they host it. So
All
we'll
I'm
worry
missing
about
is a
that.
number now. So everybody, I am a free agent.
Mhm.
I am an NFL free agent. So whoever scoops me up, I usually like the number 17. That's my birthday. So
Interesting. Right
mhm.
before we started recording, you said you were on Devonte Adams' watch, so maybe everything will kind of come full circle. there.
Full circle. I'm manifesting Devonte Adams to Pittsburgh, and hopefully it comes just in time to face your Dallas Cowboys on Sunday night.
Justin Fields is the player that we're talking about, not just in time. So it'd be very,
Mhm.
I knew a Justin Case once, and it was amazing, like to know that person.
Wow.
Yeah, and he always
Elite
joked about one.
parenting.
He always joked about wanting to name his son Book. So you know, whatever. But that's neither here nor there. Kate is our managing editor at Behind the Steel Curtain, SB Nation's Pittsburgh Steelers site. And she is again all over the internet in terms of different kinds of football content. The Locked On Dynasty podcast with our friend Marcus Mosher, Yahoo Fantasy. If we have time, and I could told you I will ensure that we do, you're going to diagnose my dynasty team because it's in dire straits. But we are here to preview the Cowboys Steelers game, Sunday Night Football, first Sunday night game for the Cowboys and Steelers, I guess, this season. And the Cowboys' pets' heads are falling off. It has been a very volatile day. We're recording on Wednesday, and Brandon Cooks, the news of him having an infection in his knee popped up. Dallas was already down in the playmaker department, and now it's really just Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb. A very different sequence of events than the last time Dallas went to Pittsburgh. I was there. It was an incredible memory for us. I hope it was for you. I hope you remember it at the very least is kind of maybe what I'm getting at. Your general thoughts, your general vibes, because the Steelers are coming off of an embarrassing loss. Joe Flacco still owns you. Where's your mindset going into week 5?
I'm actually quite terrified because the scales do feel tipped in Pittsburgh's direction here, which I'm going to say, just as a Steelers fan in general, anytime the scales are tipped in our favor, it feels like we let off the gas. Like, we came into the season and there was this quarterback controversy and, the question marks about like, what is this offensive line going to look like? They didn't land Brandon Ayuk. There were a lot of negative storylines coming out about the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I think that underdog mentality kind of took over this, nitty gritty defense, this ball control style offense. It all kind of worked through the first 3 weeks of the season. And then all hell broke loose in Indianapolis. And this was kind of a trap game for the Steelers. Like this was a road game where the Pittsburgh Steelers were favored. This was a Colts offense that couldn't stop turning over the ball. And what is Pittsburgh good at? They're good at forcing turnovers, getting, pressure on opposing quarterbacks. You have TJ Watt, Alex Highsmith was out of this one, but you have Nick Herbig, a second-year player with a ton of potential and just athleticism, splash playmaking ability, and they fell short. So now I'm looking at this home game, right? They say like the Pittsburgh environment. Okay, great. Cowboys down several playmakers, and Brandon Ayuk, like you mentioned, just kind of the latest, or Brandon Cooks, just the latest
You're
of
still
that.
stuck. You got to let it go. He didn't choose
I
you.
gotta let it go. I can't. Until Devontae Adams comes home to the 4-1-2. I can't let it go. But there's this kind of momentum, I feel like, trying to build in Pittsburgh's favor, but they fall trap to these games every single year. So like, how am I supposed to feel confident coming into this game, despite the strengths on defense, despite the fact that Justin Fields playing really well right now, despite the fact that there are injuries on the other side of the ball? How am I supposed to feel confident?
I would offer. So this was kind of the mentality that I had with Kyle Barber 2 weeks ago when he sat where you're sitting now. I hope he, left it in a decent place for you. It was because at the time the Ravens were 0-2. Obviously, they've won every game since then. And it was kind of a down bad off. Like we're worse off. No, you're worse off, right? Like, no, like this guy, like we are more oppressed. No, you're more oppressed. Right? Like it was just kind of debating that. And I kind of feel like you don't have a right to feel as bad as we do. Because you have stumbled into this. Your team is never an embarrassment. I know that the standard is similarly high for the Steelers as it is for the Cowboys, but even then, Pittsburgh has obviously experienced success to the ultimate degree way more often and way more frequently than Dallas has, at least as far as the 21st century is concerned. But that being said, if your question, rhetorical or not, is, how am I supposed to feel good? It's because the Cowboys have, you mentioned strengths and things like that. Like what are you going to lose sleep over this week when it comes to the Cowboys? Like, I don't know what it is. I know you're somebody who believes in Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, but that's it. Like that's the show for this team. Like, and this is one of the best defenses in the NFL. Like I completely trust the Steelers to take care of business. Like it was an extremely low level of probability that Brandon Cooks was going to be a difference maker on a weekly basis for the Cowboys. But with him not even in the fold, like it's very, very difficult to ascertain any sort of opportunity for Dak Prescott. He has the highest tight window throw percentage at this point in the season in his career. I mean, he's really being tasked to make lemonade. And I think the Steelers are a team that's, very capable of capitalizing on something like that.
And here's the thing too. I mean, you mentioned it, when you have these tight window plays, like that's kind of a place where the Pittsburgh Steelers can really make some moves. We've had, Minka Fitzpatrick, pretty quiet season to this point, but they're moving him around the defensive formation a ton. And once you get like one hand up, you break up one pass, the Steelers are just always around the ball. Like there's always 50 guys there to make a play. Even Dante Jackson, who I've had a lot of mixed feelings about to this point. Like he's gotten into the mix. Like there's Deshaun Elliott. Like there's a lot of different guys that just always seem to be around the ball. And I think that's a huge plus. I don't think that we have the personnel to match up with CeeDee Lamb. I don't think anybody in the league is really capable of matching up with CeeDee Lamb one-on-one, especially when you're using him out of the slot, which still an area of weakness. It just seems like perennially for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I will say, like, in terms of even the run game, right? Like, you guys have had a very ineffective run game to this point, averaging 3.54 yards per rush attempt. The Steelers, even though like they're known in this Arthur Smith scheme to run the ball, they're only averaging 3.7 yards per carry. Najee Harris not playing particularly well in this Arthur Smith scheme, like bouncing him to the outside. Like, Najee Harris is a bulldog, just run him up the middle. And, now the Steelers have all these injuries on the offensive line. So they've lost 3 starting offensive linemen to this point in the season. I'm just like, I look at this matchup and I think, like, the best player on the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't know that there's any player, George Pickens or otherwise, that can be unbeatable in the way that like a CeeDee Lamb Dak Prescott connection is. And that's my biggest concern. The run game, sure, I think they'll shut that down quick. But even keeping up on offense, like that might be an area where the Steelers can find some rhythm. If they come out a little bit hotter and get into a rhythm more early, like that might be great. But they still only have, one wide receiver, right? Like the Cowboys have one wide receiver. Jalen Tolbert made some nice plays, but like not an every down receiver. You have, Jake Ferguson. We have Pat Freiermuth. Like offensively, like we're kind of 1-for-1, ineffective run game. Like it's a lot of one-on-one, but what the Steelers don't have is that unbeatable wide receiver. And I think George Pickens is getting there, but that's my concern.
I completely understand that. You talked about things that the Steelers don't have. The Cowboys won't have in this game Micah Parsons or DeMarcus Lawrence, which I think is what creates the advantage. Like if these are sort of like equally inefficient offenses, they're, the defenses they're up against are very different. Obviously, Pittsburgh is one of the better units in the NFL. Dallas, even before these injuries, was really, really, really struggling. This feels like the Najee Harris get right game. Like I haven't looked at what like his prop lines are for this week, but I'm very inclined to take the over, just at the very least for some sort of emotional hedge in terms of how I'm feeling individually. You talked about Justin Fields and you talked about CeeDee Lamb. There was a CeeDee point, and I don't want to steal credit from you. Mentioned your wife and her name that is super complicated. I don't know to what degree she's involved in this accumulation of data and information for the NFL Pro, Next Gen Stats and whatnot, but she's an amazing researcher, obviously, for NFL media. And this was really depressing or really eye-opening for me as a part of this week's insights for the Cowboys Steelers game. So CeeDee Lamb has plus 144 receiving yards over expected out of wide alignment this season. He had a 65-yard touchdown against New Orleans and a 55-yard touchdown against the Giants. That obviously is kind of doing the heavy lifting there. He is -9 as far as lining up in the slot in terms of receiving yards over expected. So we know traditionally CeeDee Lamb to be this amazing slot monster. He hasn't been that this year. Now it's 4 games, like a very, very small sample size in the grand scheme of things, but that has not been the case. So like one of the kryptonites, you may feel exists kind of isn't there. Like that's where I would offer the Cowboys have been a little bit neutered so far this season.
And I think that defensively, that might just be like the matchup. The Dallas Cowboys defense here might be the get right game for Najee Harris. Maybe they can run it up the middle a little bit more successfully. I'm thinking the same about CeeDee Lamb here in the slot. And again, like you'll always see these, random tight ends, line up in the slot. Just name a random tight end any given week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And no, against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And guess what? They're going to score at some point. They're going to make a big splash play, get a ton of yards after the catch. And maybe this is just kind of like 2 teams that both feel like they're at an immense disadvantage here. So maybe it does just come down the defense. And I guess if I'm trying to be unbiased here, but I do definitely think that edge comes to the Steelers, especially in terms of health. The Steelers have some injuries in general, but Cam Hayward playing out of his mind. TJ Watt always playing out of his mind.
Right.
Nick Herbig, there's a lot of things to like. Joey Porter Jr., for as much as I want to scream every time he has a pass interference call, he's a pretty solid young quarterback in this league that I think this time next year, we might be talking about him as one of the premier, like, shutdown corners, like a Pat Surtain, like Sauce Gardner. Like, he's going to be that guy. I don't know. Maybe you just made me feel better.
I'm telling
Is that
you.
your
I mean,
goal?
well, my goal is to be objective, and, and my goal is to call it like it is. But I found that particular data point alarming because we have these, I won't call them preconceived notions, but we have these notions that are founded in a lot of evidence and history. And CeeDee Lamb in the slot is one of them. That would, in my mind, be one of the great strengths of what the Cowboys have done. But it hasn't been there this season. And again, while he seems to be dominating out wide, and I'm using the word dominating very loosely, again, that is mostly built on a 65 and a 55-yard touchdown. Those types of things aren't sustainable. Those are the second and third longest touchdowns of CeeDee Lamb's career to this point. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about like these, you can't hit half-court shots, to win the game every night. Like, that's just...
And diagnose that for me then. So, like, what do you think is the biggest problem for the Cowboys at this point in regards to just, like, is it the fact that, CeeDee Lamb's deal came in at the last hour and, maybe there's, just some, like, rhythm that needs to be established from the season, and like, what is it? Like, if you had to come in, Coach Ochoa, and you're gonna
very
fix...
difficult to say phonetically too, like that slow Coach Ochoa. That's it's like running in quicksand type stuff.
Yeah, we're not here to make things easy for you, but like, you're coming in, you're gonna game plan with the Dallas Cowboys on Friday and how to fix this CeeDee Lamb problem. And it's not like, I wouldn't say it's a huge problem, but you're probably not maximizing his greatest kind of edge over opposing defenses is some of that mismatch that he can give you out of the slot. Like, what is the problem and how do you fix it then?
I think that it's a variety of issues. And I also don't mean to just be like, everything sucks, like we can't fix anything, bad. But when CeeDee Lamb first into the NFL, obviously Amari Cooper was still on his team. Michael Gallup was, still a functional NFL player. And so you could afford to line him up in the slot because you had viable threats outside. I mean, if I'm game planning against Coach Kate, oh no, Jalen Tolbert and Kevontae Turpin are lined up out wide. Like, we're really going to lose sleep over this. Like, it just is, it isn't threatening. And in a general way, throwing the ball is a much more dangerous thing than handing the ball off, right? Like, you're putting the ball in the air. More things can and will, or more bad things can and will happen. And so if you're lining them up in the slot and working the middle of the field, you're throwing through an enormous amount of traffic, just on principle, right? Like, in a fundamental sort of way. And you're already asking Dak Prescott, as is, to throw into more tight windows than anybody in the NFL because of the lack of true star playmakers around him. And so, I mean, I'm not willing to say, or I'm not willing to deny that CeeDee missing training camp is part of it. Fine. Like, maybe that's 10% of this overall quote unquote problem, but the offense just isn't viable. It's just the Dak and CeeDee show. You have no threats. And because you have no threats, you can't build up any rhythm. You can't, those are CeeDee's 2 touchdowns this year. Think about it. His shortest touchdown this year is 55 yards out because they can't get into, consistent red zone opportunities because they can't run the ball effectively because they have no other weapons. And I would say their second best weapon, especially in the aftermath of the Brandon Cooks news, maybe even before that, is Jake Ferguson, who missed a little bit of time already so far this season. So it's an incredibly taxing thing to do with Dak and with CeeDee, and you're seeing the ripple effects. And I think on the outside, it looks like what's wrong with CeeDee when it's really what's wrong with everything else. So people have asked, like, how do you fix this? Well, I don't know. Maybe you use March and April to bring in legitimate talent. I mean, maybe you trade for Devontae Adams and break Kate's heart. You know what I mean? Like, you cannot. People act like it's this embarrassment, that to say that offenses need help. You need a lot of playmakers in every single offense. And when you just have one, he can be incredibly talented, like CeeDee Lamb. Like, look at, I don't mean to go long-winded, look at Justin Jefferson. I mean, I'm not saying he wouldn't be Justin Jefferson, but Jordan Addison helps. He had Adam Thielen. Like, you have to have those rising tides that lift all the boats.
I think my biggest takeaway from this conversation is not necessarily feeling great about this matchup against the Cowboys. Anything that can and will go wrong in a matchup where the Steelers are favored is generally going to happen. But my biggest takeaway from this conversation is that the Cowboys and the Steelers feel like mirror images of each other right now. And that kind of scares me. It kind of like in a good way, but also a bad way. Like I actually feel like I'm listening to you tell me a story about the Pittsburgh Steelers when you're actually telling me about the Dallas Cowboys. And that's just kind of a crazy place for the Cowboys to be after an entire off season, to be in this position where you did get CD under contract, you did get Dak his extension. What else? Like, what else? It was kind of like, the Steelers build up this premier defense. Well, if you don't have the offense to at least get in some sort of rhythm consistently as a team to put points on the board, it doesn't matter because your defense will occasionally lapse. And if you're it doesn't matter that you're investing all this money into this one unit if the rest of your entire roster can't carry anything. Like the Dallas Cowboys and the Pittsburgh Steelers are more alike on offense than probably anybody wants to admit.
Yeah, you mentioned they were mirror images of one another. I think the difference is the mirror the Steelers are looking into is like it's like one of those mirrors at a gym that's like kind of foggy and like been scuffed up, and like people write on it with like the markers like their goals or like however many sets or whatever they did. Whereas the Cowboys mirror, I don't know how to pronounce this either, so maybe that's just like the theme of the episode is in the Sorcerer's Stone, the mirror of Erised or
Yes.
Erised or whatever, where you look in it and you see like your greatest dreams. Like that's the mirror the Cowboys look into. Like they're not seeing reality for anything as far as their own kind of reflection is concerned.
That does feel like the kind of Jerry Jones way though, which is like really unfortunate because I do feel like in at least in the Steelers regard right now, Omar Khan been pretty aggressive so far as a GM. Obviously kind of blundered the wide receiver situation going into the 2024 season with Van Jefferson at wide receiver 2. Not going to be a great thing for your budding star in George Pickens and the passing game that you're trying to reinvent with, Justin Fields or Russell Wilson. Like that was obviously a huge blunder, but at least he's making moves and making splashes.
Yeah.
Jerry Jones, it seems so content right now. And maybe he goes on like some talk shows. He's like, but the moves he's making screams content and almost like borderline arrogance that, well, I have CeeDee Lamb, I have Dak Prescott, put it all on them, kind of like the Chiefs have done with Mahomes over the past few years. Like, well, I've got a really good quarterback. I don't need to supplement. Like, if my quarterback's as good as I'm paying him to be, he shouldn't need all this extra help, right? And I feel like that's kind of where the Dallas Cowboys stand. But then again, I don't know. Like I listened to some of the narratives that came out last week from the players of the Pittsburgh Steelers following that embarrassing loss to the Colts. And it's like, you know what? We should have practiced harder. Like that was the takeaway from these players, and that screams culture problem to me. So like maybe both. I'm telling you, I feel like these organizations are on a more similar path than really anybody in the national media could ever possibly conceptualize.
That's the point of these kinds of conversations, is to get that insight, and so it's really valuable. I think my last kind of point is these are teams who are kind of, I wouldn't even say Pittsburgh's getting punched in the mouth right now. They obviously did last week, but the Cowboys have shown a propensity for when they get punched in the mouth to just kind of lay down and fold. I hate to say that, but all evidence supports that idea. Whereas the Steelers, at least the national perception around them is they get punched in the mouth. Mike Tomlin, it will just kind of rough and tough it. And I think that has borne itself out more often than not. So I trust them to be more responsive. That being said, as far as predictions for this game are concerned, we didn't really mention Justin Fields and, I'm sorry. But I think that Dak is going to be asked to obviously win the game, and I'm willing to bet on that. Not to a large extent, but I'm going to lean Cowboys slightly because I trust him to put he's in a position now in his career that he wasn't in that first game, obviously, that we talked about when Dallas went there 8 years ago. I'm going to lead them ever so slightly, especially if I'm getting points, which is the line right now. Your prediction before you diagnose my horrible dynasty team.
I'm going to go ahead and take the Steelers, and I kind of have to do it, but I'm picturing a very low scoring outing, 17-14.
Gross.
Just kind of a standard, relatively boring game, but one where, like, let's say Chris Boswell comes in clutch with a 50-plus yarder that he's been drilling all year long in a stadium that generally is kind of hard to kick in. But Chris Boswell, Captain Clutch, I think my envision, I feel like we're just kind of be back and forth, and then Chris Boswell is going to come in and have the league winning or the week winning field goal. So
there's a lot of power in numbers and a lot of like mental powers and mental energy that some people believe in to different degrees. 17 came up again for you. Look at that. The winning score was
oh my
17
God.
points. Yeah. You're thinking about it more than you realize. I mean, that's all I'm kind of just pointing out to you at this point.
Yeah, this is kind of tripping me out, but I think all that's to say Davante Adams come home to the 4-1 too.
Okay, so in addition to like the 14 jobs she has, I could have gone 17 there, but it would have been too easy. That Kate has, she hosts the Lockdown Dynasty podcast with Marcus Mosher, and my Dynasty team. So only Dynasty league I've ever been in, and I'm embarrassed to say I've never won it. So, but I'm not too proud to say that I'm at a place where I need help. I need to consult a professional. That's what you are. I'm 0-4. I'm the only winless team here. So I need you to, one, determine if my best course of action is to tank at this point in time, and then what my tradable assets should be, because it is a dynasty league. It's a very different approach than a redraft league. And then I will tell you the offers that I'm currently mulling over and see if you think I should pull the trigger, if that's all okay with you.
I love this. Yes.
Okay.
Let's ride.
So this is my dynasty team as it currently stands. For anyone who can't zoom in and see, or if you can't, Kate, my starting lineup is constructed with Jamar Chase not involved because I've been dangling him. You know, I'm playing the subliminal, like, hey, he's not in my starting lineup game. You know, I've got to work that with my league mates. Trevor Lawrence, Justice Hill, Carson Steele. I told you I was down bad. Jacoby Myers, CeeDee Lamb, Jameson Williams, Dalton Schultz, Allen Lazard, the Cowboys defense. On my bench, obviously a large bench because it is dynasty. Austin Eckler, Jamar Chase is noted, Evan Ingram, Jalen Hyatt, the Jets defense, Miles Sanders, the Packers defense, Anthony Richardson. I'm just really, really, really down bad. Michael Mayer, Jalen Tolbert, Taysom Hill, Jalen Warren, your boy, Trey Benson, Bo Nix was one of my draft picks, obviously. Long-term play there. Alec Pierce, and as of Tuesday nights, waiver wire process, Joe Flacco, because I just need some kind of help. So
of course.
Your overall thoughts. Don't be shy.
I gotta say, Trevor Lawrence, again, like this is kind of hard because injuries shaped like, when you look at Dalton Schultz in there, if he was replaced by Evan Ingram, who has unfortunately been injured, like things would look a lot different. CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. I think what your problem is right here is that you're too top heavy.
Okay.
You have these elite 2 wide receivers, CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase, but like what else is behind them? My course of action for you is to start to break down these assets, and it's going to hurt. I would say pick your favorite. I wonder who it's going to be, CeeDee Lamb or Jamar Chase, and leverage the other one in a trade offer. You're going to have to use some unique maneuvering. I think, especially considering that, depending on Jamar Chase and the timing of this matchup against the Ravens, for example, like might not be a best time to sell. CeeDee Lamb going up against the Steelers. We already talked about that matchup a ton, but like neither of those wide receivers are like in great plus matchups this week. So you might need to time this a little bit better. But I always think like if you're starting 0-4 and you're not looking at your roster and saying like, how is this? Like, for example, I'm 2-2 in a league where, I mean, my roster is just absolutely stacked and it's just been bad luck. And I'm looking at my roster and I'm like, these are, I've got 3 top 10 wide receivers, but they're all hitting at different times. And it's just been a culmination of bad luck. When you look at the roster though, and you say, that doesn't look great and you're 0-4, I think it's time to break it down and see what you can get. So I got to say, I think it's time to hashtag tank for whoever's going to be the 101. And part of that is just going to be about like getting younger. Jacoby Myers, for instance, he has the potential to be like the wide receiver 1 here in Las Vegas if they do get a trade done for Davante Adams.
Good point.
That's going to be a great asset to sell to a team in contention right now. You look at Jameson Williams, like another name very hot off the market, not necessarily seeing as much usage, like in terms of target rate on route run, but like this is a great time to sell high on Jamison Williams. You have a lot of interesting assets. If, for example, the Jets don't get Davante Adams, as everybody's projecting, Alan Lazard has been like the apple of Aaron Rodgers' eye. I think you've got a lot of really nice players to sell high on.
Okay, I like this. I feel a lot better. So we're in agreement. It's time to, we're playing for 2025. We're all cool here, and we're in agreement. You joked about wondering who was going to be CD on the no trade list. This isn't an irrational
I'm
thing.
shocked.
But I'm asking because, again, this is my only Dynasty League I've ever done. It's normal. It's fine. It's allowable to put one person in this guy's going to be a part of the my Joel Embiid, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, this guy's not going anywhere. He's going to be a part of the future. I'm cool with. I'm not making a mistake by doing this because I'm talking to other people who are doing in similar situations with their own Dynasty teams. I'm good with this, right? This isn't a wrong sort of step.
So I do think, generally speaking, I don't like to have like players that are absolutely no-goes, but I love to tell people that people are off the block, and that way they know like this is going to take a lot of, whether it be draft capital, other stars involved, like play the psychology game there a little bit. Say like,
Good
you know
for
what,
you, Kate. Look at you. Wow.
Jamar Chase on the block, I'll accept some offers. CeeDee Lamb, I'm looking to keep, not looking to move him unless you absolutely blow me away. Like,
Okay.
give them a little something. Let them know that like it's not 100% no, but it's a 99.5%. And if somebody's willing to overpay, because sometimes I've had that happen where somebody's like, no, I just need this guy on my dynasty roster. I've sometimes been that person that I just need that guy on my dynasty roster. And sometimes you are willing to overpay. So sometimes it's also about just playing that sort of psychology. You play it like the stock market. Like I mentioned, some of those like players that are kind of high up in the value range right now comparative to where they've previously been, a Jacoby Myers, a Jamison Williams. Like, this is when you can capitalize. I say you keep your Trey Benson, for example, who has virtually no trade value whatsoever right now, but I think has both the skill set and potential opportunity to be like a top 15 pick or a top 15 dynasty RB next year. Like,
right.
You've got a lot of really solid blocks. So my advice to anybody in a similar situation is just play the trade market, see what assets you can't envision being a long-term part of your team's success, and get the other guys off your roster as soon as possible. Look toward the future, do some scouting of yourself. Like, a great tip that I think probably one of my more underrated pieces of advice is to like look at go to Spotrac, Over the Cap, look at players that are going to hit free agency next year, because this might be a great time to go and buy up some of their backups at low value. Like,
like
James
like
Conner
the
behind
Jacoby
Le'Veon
Myers.
Bell.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. Great.
yeah.
Wow. Okay,
I'm
so
rooting for you now. I'm all
well,
in.
I'm interrupting you because now I'm really excited because I have a project, you know what I mean, to work on.
Mhm.
I'm going to move Jamar. I'm going to slow play, but try to move Alan Lazard if Davante Adams ends up elsewhere, and I'm going to maybe sell on Jacoby Myers if Davante Adams leaves. I'm going to sell. I hadn't really given consideration to selling Jamison Williams, but especially after the Monday night, moonshot touchdown, I think now is the time to the people who I don't trade Jamar to, the people who I'm negotiating with. That it's like, well, you didn't get Jamar, but how about we talk about one of these guys? And if you really overwhelm me on CD, I suppose I could make an exception type thing.
Yep.
Now, this is the offer I'm considering for Jamar as we close. And it's worth mentioning, 12-team league. We're looking at RJ having the number 1 overall pick, obviously, in the top pick in all 3 rounds. This guy might win the league. So that's important context. He has offered me my choice of Jackson Smith and Jigba or Brandon Ayuk. So I get to supplement, you know what I mean, my loss of Jamar Chase with a star guy. His first and second round draft pick in exchange for my second round draft pick. And I really don't want to swap seconds because we're talking about the 13th overall pick here from me and the 24th overall pick from him. So I'm kind of negotiating there, but he also wants to swap his Panthers defense for my Packers defense because he's contending this year. He needs another defensive option. So your thoughts in general?
I hate the pick swap. I hate that. Like, for that reason alone, I wouldn't do it. I think you can get more on Jamar Chase. Like, I think obviously the market for Jamar Chase going to be very competitive, just in general. But I'd look to, try to get somebody maybe in a higher tier. I think this is a great time to buy low on Brandon Ayuk, but you should be buying low on Brandon Ayuk. A player that I really like that I think is kind of undervalued that I think you might be able to swindle. And depending on who rosters this player, I love the idea of going and grabbing Nico Collins right now, who I feel like still in the back of everybody's minds, we're still wondering, is he the real deal? Yes, he's the real deal. Tied to one of the best young quarterbacks in the league, Stephon Diggs, on a 1-year deal. Like, this is the Nico Collins show. And I feel like there's just this general sentiment in the Dynasty community that he's not the real deal, but I'm inching him closer and closer to like wide receiver 6, wide receiver 7 in Dynasty. Like, so massively underrated right now. See if you can capitalize on like a Malik Neighbors, even just breaking that down just a little bit. You're taking a slight decrease in value on Malik Neighbors, obviously still valued pretty high, but it's about these little assets that you can start to collect by breaking these larger pieces down into a greater sum.
Okay, this is all good advice. I can work with this, and everybody can work with this relative to their own league, and they can hear your dynasty advice, like I said with Marcus on the Locked On Dynasty podcast. They can also check out your fantasy work in general at Yahoo Fantasy, and your Steelers work at Behind the Steel Curtain. Kate, when do you sleep? Is my question.
I don't. I sleep when I'm dead, and I'm dead at the end of football season. So that's how I get it done.
As we part, a non-football recommendation. It can be a movie, it could be a television show, it could be an album, it could be a book, it could be anything you want. Cowboys bye week's coming up, and to be honest, football season kind of sucks right now. So like something to distract us. What do you got?
I'm rewatching Modern Family right now. I don't know if you've ever watched Modern Family, classic
insulting
television.
thing to say. Of course, I've seen Modern Family. What a horrible
Thank
thing
God.
to say.
Okay. I'm rewatching it, and I'm going to be honest. I'm just like, it's been, I will occasionally have it up on TV, have it in the background, but like I'm actually sitting down and rewatching it, and I'm just so overtaken with joy, and just that show gives me energy and gives me life. So I'm firmly recommending to anybody that has not either seen Modern Family or just needs like giggles and laughter. Like, life is doom and gloom, my friends. Like, we deserve laughter in our lives, and Modern Family is just such a goodie.
Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't get the same kind of like elite categorization that The Office and Parks and Rec do, but it belongs there. I watch Sunday Night Football on Peacock, and so afterwards, while I'm working, I generally throw on Parks and Rec. And you're right, it is nice to kind of have just that slight little comfort. And also working in Modern Family's favor. To my knowledge, it isn't one of these shows that has a podcast recapping every episode and telling us about the super secret, camera mishap that happened. We don't need this. Like, we're done. I respect the office ladies grinding, and I respect the hustle. I really do, but I don't need that information in my life personally.
Totally fair. TBD on that podcast. I would probably still end up listening to it just because I'm a sucker. I can get sucked into anything, but Modern Family, just such good television. And you're right, like, doesn't get the flowers that a show like The Office or Parks and Rec does. It's just like one of these very funny but like quality TV shows that is wholehearted and still, kind of quirky, and it's good TV. And I can't wait to go watch some more of it, because I'm just kind of like, I'm binging it as if it's the first time I saw it. That's how good it is.
I think it's because it's too clever. Honestly, like some of the jokes go over people's heads, so they don't recognize how funny it is. And I almost want to say to them, like, you don't deserve this. Like, if you're not getting the how funny this is, you don't deserve to watch. You should have your subscription to this service revoked.
Yes.
So that's how I feel. Those are my thoughts on life at large. Kate, Magdzuik.
Yeah.
It's so hard. I mean, like, seriously, like, what, you, me, your family, your in-law. I mean, all of them, everyone you're related to by marriage. We'll sit down. We'll discuss this, because we can't do this anymore. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, Magd.
Oh, you're so close.
Ziuk.
Yes, you got it.
Let's go. We'll put the link.
We accomplished one thing today on the show.
Yeah. We'll put the link to Kate's Twitter down in the description. Kate, you are the best. Go Cowboys, and Des caught it.